get going. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Laskavo, proшу, bienvenidos. Welcome to our first October reading for Cultivating Voices live poetry. Today is our Sunday special, featuring new titles from Lost Horse Press. I'm Sandy Yannone, your host and author of Boats for Women from Salmon Poetry, and I'm joining you today from Olympia, Washington, which I like to acknowledge is also on the unceded territory on the Salish coastal peoples. As always, I appreciate everyone who comes to the readings today. We have a great live audience here in Zoom, and also imagining folks watching us live on Facebook. Welcome to all of you. I want to particularly thank our readers from last week for our new book showcase. Carolyn Wright, Claire Kelly, Jim Seelar, and Marge Sizer. If you missed the reading, you can watch this fabulous display of poets on the recordings on our Cultivating Voices live Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. And thank you very much to Don Krieger for that. Well, before we get started today, I want to remind our wonderful audiences who've assembled that for today's Sunday special, the chats here are live, both here in Zoom and on Facebook. So please send the love to all our writers who have joined us today. And now to today's reading. For some of us, it's this evening that are reading with us. Again, this week is a Sunday special event where we are celebrating and showcasing the newest titles from Lost Horse Press. And we've got joining us today, publisher Christine Holbert. You will be hearing the featured poets and translators of 4 new titles with poets that are joining us from the Ukraine, Germany, and the United States. It's amazing that we'll get to hear poetry from 2 of the collections in both the poet's home language of Ukrainian and in English. And as those of you who know me, I very much value when we get to hear the home language. So before I introduce our first poet and translator, I'm going to invite Christine Holbert to say a few words. And thank you, Christine, for one, publishing this amazing kaleidoscope of work that we're going to be hearing from today. And congratulations on the new titles.
Thanks so much, Sandy. And thanks so much for hosting the book launch. I love doing it on Zoom. I love doing it safely. And also, we would never be able to get these people together. So it's just a wonderful platform, and you're a great host. So thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome the audience. Thank you all for coming to this introduction of the new books. I'm very proud of these 4 titles. You'll be able to order them on our website, www.losthorsepress.org, or through the distributor, the University of Washington Press, if you're a bookstore or you need a lot of copies for classes or something like that. So without further ado, I'm going to let Sandy introduce the readers. Thank you very, very much for coming, and enjoy this wonderful poetry.
Thank you, Christine. Well, as I mentioned, we are fortunate to have some of our readers joining us from later in the evening from the Ukraine and Germany this evening. And so we're going to begin with Lyuba, Yakimchuk, and joining us. And her book, Apricots of Donbas, is the 7th book in the Lost Horse Press's contemporary Ukrainian poetry series. Lyuba is a poet.
Hello,
Yep.
hello everyone. I'm happy to be here. It's 10 p.m. in Ukraine. It's maybe my lightest poetry reading, I guess, or maybe not, something like this. Nevertheless, stick around for the next 15 minutes. And first, my poem is part of long poem Apricots of Donbas in Ukrainian language. Вугілля обличчя. Із очима морськими синіми та з волоссям жовтим ляним, трохи вилиняним. Це не прапор, це стоїть у шахті по коліна у воді мій тато. Його обличчя як вугілля, із відтиском польового хвоща допотопного, роками розтоптане. Море твердне сіллю, трава твердне вугіллям, а тато стає як трава ковла, сивим. Він чоловік, а чоловіки не плачуть, так кажуть в рекламі, а щоки його рівчаками порубала шахта, і вугілля, добуте з обличчя мого батька, згоріло в Донбас у пічках і багаттях. А десь там високо стоїть терикон, гарчить терикон, як дракон, як сфінкс, що захищає свого Тутанхамона. І знаю тільки я одна, що посеред степу терикон – це корки від пляшок, які тато випив, і попіл від цигарок, що викурив тато. And Svetlana translation. Svetlana, please.
So, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. So, well, for a little preface, there have been 3 of us translators of Lyuba's book. I'm the 3rd translator, and the first and foremost are Oksana Maksimchuk and Max Rosachinsky. They are unable to be here today yet. I will do my best to represent everyone. So, the coal face. With eyes sea blue and hair flaxen yellow, faded a little, it's not a flag, it's my father, standing in a flooded mine, water up to his knees. His face like coal, with a print of an antediluvian field horsetail. Trampled by years, the sea hardens into salt, the grass hardens into coal, and father turns like feather grass gray. He's a man, and men don't cry. So the saying goes, his cheeks are trenches chopped up by the mine, and the coal from my father's face burned in Donbas bonfires and ovens. And somewhere high up, there stands a terracone, the terracone snarling like a dragon, like a sphinx, defending its Tutankhamun. And it's only me who knows that the pit heap in the middle of the steppe is nothing but caps from the bottles that Dad drank and ashes of the cigarettes that Dad smoked.
Терикон грудей. Дерева оці, як кольорові олівці, понавтикані вздовж дороги. І тільки часом проїде крас посеред степу в лісосмужку. Донбас, Донбас, шипить труба сонцю на вушко. Ти стоїш у спецформі вугляного агента і пахнеш парфумно реагентами. Я жінка, моя стихія водна, це не тільки зробити чай чи помити посуд, ні. Хоч жінок не беруть у шахту, але беруть на фабрику вуглепереробну, і я мию вугілля, ніби мила би коси. Я вугілля подрібнюю, наче ріжу картоплю або перемелюю м'ясо у блендері фабрики і заправляю маслом розтопленим, тобто поливаю цей борщ реагентами. Слухай, Оці компліменти про красу донбаських дівчат мають якийсь сенс, якщо побачити ці заводи, якщо спуститися в шахти або скупатися в отруєних водах від стійників, куди спускають юшку від мого оцього борщу, якщо залізти на терикон і провалитись йому під ковдру, точніше, в пряму кишку, а перед тим побачити цвіт абрикос, ніжно-білий цвіт абрикос, а в осінь побачити їхнє жовте волосся із висоти вагонеткового польоту.
The terracones of breasts. These stalks are like colored pencils stuck along the road. Just now and then a truck will pass amid the step in the copse. Donbas, Donbas. The chimneys hiss into the whirl of the sun's ear. You stand in the uniform of a coal agent and smell perfume-like of reagents. I'm a woman. My element is water. This is not just for making tea or washing the dishes. No. Although women don't work in mines, but at factories they very well do. Coal handling, and I wash the coal like I'd wash my braids. I crush the coal like I'd cut potatoes or grind meat in the factory blender and drizzle it over with oil, melted. That is over this borscht. I pour reagents. You know, all these compliments to Donbas girls on their beauty make sense if you see those factories, if you go down into the mine or bathe in the poisoned waters of the sumps where the broth is dumped from this borscht of mine, climb up the terracone and tumble under its blanket, namely, down its column, but before that, catch a glimpse of the apricot blossom, supple, white apricot blossom, and in the fall, see their yellow curls from the height of the mine trolley's flight.
Від старості. Померли дід і баба. В один день померли. В одну годину, в одну хвилину. Люди говорили, що від старості. Здохла їхня курка, їхня коза та собака, а кішки не було вдома. І люди говорили, що від старості. Розвалилась їхня хата, сарай став руїною, і погріб зверху присипало землею. Люди говорили, що від старості розвалились. Прийшли їхні діти ховати діда з бабою. Оля була вагітна, Сергій був п'яний, а Соня мала 3 рочки. І вони теж померли, а люди говорили, що від старості. Холодний вітер обірвав жовте листя і поховав під ним діда, бабу, Олю, Сергія, Соню, які померли від старості.
Of old age. An old man and an old woman died on the same day, on the same hour, on the same minute. People said they died of old age. Their hen died, as did their goat and their dog, but the cat wasn't home. And people said they'd died of old age. Their house fell apart, their shed turned into a ruin. The cellar was powdered over with dust. People said they were just too old. Their children came to bury the old man and the old woman. Ola was pregnant. Serhii was drunk. Sonia was only 3, and they died too. And people said they had died of old age. A cold wind plucked off the yellow leaves and buried under them the old man the old woman, Ola, Serhiy, and Sonia, who all died of old age.
Ніж. Із родичами ділимо стіл та могили, із ворогами тільки могили. Приходить один такий претендент поділити зі мною могилу, мовить до мене: я більший, ніж ти, я твердіший, ніж ти, я міцніший, ніж ти. Ніж за ножем всаджує у живіт і нижче, ніж за ножем його жим пружинний, але він менший, ніж ми, він м'якіший, ніж ми, бо ніж у нього один, а нас за столом багато, і в кожного своє ніж, і в кожного свій ніж. Мовить до мене: я твердіший автомат ви, я більший автомат ви, мат за матом, автомат за автоматом. Тримайтесь, кажуть, тримайтесь. І ми тримаємось за наш стіл та випиваємо із дула автомата по своїй кулі і гостю наливаємо одну.
A little bit of insider knowledge about this poem of Lyuba's. You know, it's called Knife. And when I asked her what inspired her to write this poem, she told that it was born of two revelations. And the first was during an everyday conversation when it struck her that in Ukrainian, that is niž. And it sounded as sharp as its homophone, and knife is also niž in Ukrainian. And also in a war-ridden Luhansk and in Ukraine, also war-ridden despite its, well, the restricted area in which the war is happening. People say to each other, hold on, and they reiterate this phrase so often that it loses its meaning. So, knife. With relatives, we share table and graves. With enemies, only graves. One such candidate comes to share a grave with me, says to me, I'm bigger than you, I'm harder than you, I'm tougher than you. Sticks knife after knife into my stomach and below, knife after knife, his pressure spring like butt. He is smaller than us, he is softer than us, because he's got only one knife, and there are plenty of us at the table. And each has their own butt, and each has their own cut. Says to me, I'm sharper blade cut you. I'm a thicker blade cut you. Chip chop, the last one is dead. Hold on, they say, hold on. And we hold onto our table. From the gun muzzle, we all drink our bullets. We pour our enemy one, too.
У мене до тебе криза. Ти підкурював сигарету, а вона не горіла. Стояло літо, і дівчата спалахували від першого ліпшого, а я від тебе вже ні. Наша любов зникла безвісти, пояснює другу, пропала на одній із воєн, що ми вели в себе на кухні. Заміни слово «війна» на «криза», каже він, адже кризи бувають у всіх. Пам'ятаєш, була Друга світова криза, відповідно і Перша світова. Громадянська криза, у кожного своя. Я забула про холодну кризу, їх наче теж було дві. А ще ж про визвольну кризу треба згадати. Як добре це звучить. Визвольна криза 1648-1657. Так і запишіть у підручниках. Криза, яка визволяє, назавжди вивільнює. Мій прадід загинув від Другої світової кризи, можливо, від руки іншого мого прадіда, або від його автомату, або від його танка. От тільки не ясно, як цю кризу вони вели один з одним. Чи криза, як мор, їх убила сама? Бо ж у кризах ніби ніхто не винен, вони невідворотні, як смерть. І коли наша з тобою хатня війна перетворюється на кризу, чи стає легше, чи менше болить? Хіба птахи повертаються з півдня до нас? А може, це ми їдемо їм назустріч? І що ж це за мова в нас така? Бракує слів, щоб описати наші почуття, лишаються лише криза і любов, як антоніми. Але якщо любов буде такою складною із цими спалахами і згасаннями, як кров і біль, і кров – це зовсім не місячні, а якесь нове моє почуття, а біль – це твоє. Якщо вона буде складеною з двох різних почуттів, то скоро й любов почнуть називати кризою. У мене до тебе криза, Люба, давай одружимось, буде легше обом. У нас криза, краще би нам розлучитися.
I have a crisis for you. You lit up a cigarette, but it wouldn't burn. It was summer, and girls would light up from anyone come a table. But I didn't light up from you anymore. Our love's gone missing, I explained to a friend. It vanished in one of the wars we waged in our kitchen. Change the word war to crisis, he suggests, because a crisis is something everyone has from time to time. Remember the Second World Crisis? Correspondingly, also the First World Civil Crisis, to each his own. I forgot about the Cold Crisis. It seems they also came in twos. Also the Liberation Crisis, it sounds so good. The Liberation Crisis of 1648, 1657. Write it down in the textbooks. A crisis that liberates, releases forever. My great-grandfather fell in the Second World Crisis, possibly by the hand of my other great-grandfather, or his machine gun, or his battle tank, but it is unclear how they conducted this crisis with each other. Perhaps it was the crisis itself that killed them, like a plague, for nobody is to blame for the crisis. It is inexorable, like death. And when our own domestic war turns into crisis, does it get better? Does it hurt less? Do birds come back to us from the south, or maybe we come out to meet them? Why is our language like that? We lack words to describe our feelings. Only crisis and love are left as antonyms. But if love is bound to be so complicated with these blazes and smolderings like blood and pain, and blood is not like periods, but some new feeling of mine, and pain is yours. If love is made up of two different feelings, then soon love will also be called crisis. I have a crisis for you, darling. Let's get married. We've got a crisis. We'd better split up.
Марсала, що це саме ти, було ясно з того, як гладив кожен палець на моїй нозі. Ніби й не було в мене до тебе цих пальців, і ти їх створив з нічого. Пальці на руках для роботи, пальці на ногах ні для чого, думала я і сумнівалась, але ти наполіг, бо потрібно щось просто так мати. Доторк за доторком ти створював щось нове в мені. Маленьку родимку на шию за волоссям, велику родимку на лівій груді, яку не видно у виріз сукні. Переінакшив брови, під поцілунком це зовсім не ті брови, що під теплою водою з крану, а на спині розпускав нерівні кола, пірнаючи в неї глибоко і тремтливо, як риба. І я стою перед дзеркалом, у сукні, як марсалове вино, дивлюся поглядом сп'янілим і бачу родимку під вирізом, родимку на шиї, пушок на спині, а твої губи все ще створюють світ, і мені трохи боязко, що настане субота.
Marsala, that you're the one became clear from the way you stroked my every toe, as if I never had toes before. You'd created them out of nothing. Fingers are good for work, toes are good for nothing. I thought and hesitated, but you insisted that one has to possess something just for the sake of it. Touch after touch, you created new things in me. A little birthmark on my neck behind the hairline, a big mole on my left breast that is not seen in the cut of my dress, reshaped my eyebrows. Under your kisses, these are not the same at all as the eyebrows under the warm tap water. And on my back, you spread uneven circles, diving into it deep and trembling, fish-like. I stand in front of the mirror, my dress like Marsala wine, my gaze befuddled, and I see a mole below my chest line, a birthmark on my neck, soft down on my back, your lips still at work, creating a world. And I'm a little afraid of a Saturday.
Thank you. That was last poem today. Thank you for having us.
Many thanks for having us. Right. Didn't you want to read one more, or we have no time then?
I think we're good. Amazing.
Luba, let's do the naked. You know, if we're with erotic
Why
poems,
not?
you know,
You've
would
come
be
all
nice.
this way.
Not only war, also love, no crisis, just, you know, some humor.
Okay, maybe just in English. How do you think?
Maybe.
Okay.
Sure. So, exactly. Yeah, I offered that and got all messed up. My God, what a discipline it is. So it's exactly, here it is. Such people are called naked. You took off your t-shirt, I pulled off my dress. You unbuckled your belt, I unhooked my brassiere. You let down your pants and kicked off your socks. I freed myself out of my panties, so scanty that I'd better call them scanties. And now we lie in bed, two strips, like two white bread loaves, facing each other. You touch my cheek with your hand. You run your hand lower down my neck. You trace my collarbones with your fingers. How nicely everything is made here. You utter, but suddenly from behind your shoulder, your mom peeks out and says, Andrusha, did you wash your hands? You turn to face her, show your hands. She offers you fruit compote and goes to the kitchen. You turn back to me, put your hand back where you got interrupted. From the collarbone, it slides down to my breast, softly as sea sand. And here, I feel my dad's breath on my nape. Think with your head, child, he whispers loudly. I turn away from you and see his unshaven face very close and reply that I always think with my head. I turn back to you and now my hand slides along your chest and its downy hair bends under it. And now, behind your back, the bed creaks. Andrusha, have some fruit compote. You turn away from me, kiss her sonorously and say, Mom, I want to be alone for a little while. And she replies, offended, it doesn't look like you're alone. And she goes off again, and now you are with me again. And your hand on my stomach glides slowly down, so it gets close and tender, and so it gets so, and now I hear my grandmother's groaning. She says behind my back, I knew it. You're not a virgin anymore. See how your look changed. And I take your hand off my belly, turn half to my granny with your hand. I straighten out her purple kerchief. I see, yeah, my purple kerchief, and oh my God, the most interesting place. No, this German discipline has to be totally punished. Did I misplace that? Mark, yes, no. And this is a total disgrace. Anyway, I am doing this for a second. Yeah, this is a very nice cliffhanger. Yeah. And here.
This is what we call suspense.
This is suspense. You must know what it will get to. Yeah. Aha, right. I straighten out her purple kerchief and say in a loud voice, I'm still a virgin, Nan, and I will remain untouched forever. I turn back to you and hear over your shoulder, an old lady in a yellow kerchief peeps out, this time your granny. What female name ends with a consonant, as if it were a man's, she asks. The answer is mine, but I keep quiet and take your hands off my hips. Snow falls between us, and like two toy soldiers, we lie like this till morning. And in the morning, a cleaning lady comes, shovels away the snow mounds between us, and I look into your green eyes for a long time. And you look at my brown nipples for very long. Then I say, let's get undressed. And one by one, I take off my dad, my grandma, my mom, my sister, and you take off one by one, your mom, your brother, your childhood friend, your pick-up coach, and we're bare now, wearing nothing at all. Such people are called naked. Now we're finished. Thank you so much. And my deepest apologies for the undisciplined German manners.
Thank you so much, Lyuba and Svetlana. And I want to give you just a little bit more information about their bodies of work before we move to our next reader. Lyuba Yakimchuk's Apricots of Donbas, which you've heard from today, is the 7th book in the Lost Horse Press Contemporary Ukrainian Poetry Series. And Lyuba is a poet, a playwright, and a screenwriter with 2 previous collections of poetry, which have won both the International Slavic Poetry Award, Ukraine, and the International Poetic Award of the Kovalev Foundation in the US. Since 2019, her play, The Wall, has been running at the Ivan Franko National Academic Drama Theater, the largest in Ukraine. She was born and raised in a small town near Luhansk and now lives in Kiev, Ukraine. Thank you. And one of her wonderful translators that's here with us today, Svetlana Lavochkina, is a Ukrainian-born novelist, poet, and translator, now residing in Germany. Svetlana was runner-up for the Paris Literary Prize and finalist in both the Tibor and Jones Page Turner Prize, as well as the Million Writers Award. Her latest novel in verse, which I had the pleasure to hear from, is Carbon, published by Lost Horse Press in 2020. Much gratitude to you both for this late evening. And as folks have said in the chat, the images of the poetry so arresting to hear them in English, but the in Ukrainian, the music of them truly punctuates like they're the power of the narratives that you're telling, and amazing for our audience to be able to hear both the home language and the fabulous translation. Thank you so much to the both of you. Well, next we will be hearing from Kathryn Hunt right here in state of Washington, a little north from where I am today. Kathryn is the author of the new book, Seed Wheel, and makes her home on the coast of the Salish Sea, as I mentioned before. Her poems have appeared in The Sun, Radar, Orion, Missouri Review, Carolina Quarterly, and Narrative. Her first collection of poems, Long Way Through Ruin, was published by Blue Begonia Press. She's the recipient of residencies and awards from UCross, Artist Trusts, and Joya Air in Spain. She's made documentary films for many years, and her film, No Place Like Home, premiered at the Venice Film Festival in Italy. She's worked as a waitress, a ship scaler, a short order cook, a bookseller, a printer, food bank coordinator, filmmaker, and freelance writer. And today we have the pleasure of hearing her as poet. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you, Sandra. That was such a great introduction. Thank you. And thanks to Christine and Dawn and Kim for making this happen today. So much. I made documentary films for some years, and in 1994, I was invited to bring one of my films to St. Petersburg by Aronovich, a documentary filmmaker there. And my friends Marina and Valerie Ajaja hosted me there. Aronovich made a wonderful film about Akhmatova, and this poem is dedicated to Akhmatova. If you ever have a chance to find the film on YouTube, do, because you'll be able to hear Akhmatova read her poems in that deep, resonant voice of hers. And in the film, you'll see a young Joseph Brodsky at Akhmatova's funeral. This poem is called, Where Are Your Gloves, Anna? And this is the epigraph. But I warn you, this is my last existence, Akhmatova. All day, Marina and I walked the streets of St. Petersburg. The oily waters of the Neva bore your face, terror, clouds. We heard the pleadings of the doomed at Kresy prison, saw women pass packages for the dead to the jailers. The stone walls of the prison made us children again. Mayakovsky pointed the way to your apartment, cluttered with pots, a small bed, bereaved light. Your lovers and son stood watch in the garden. Nadezhda clucked like a hen, her mind inscribed with the songs of the vanished. Oligarchs on 6 continents shiver when the iron bell of your voice reaches them. Anna, the same booted men stride the earth, east and west, hunting for gold and for oil. Your poems are seeds in the teeth of the wind. Your gloves are on the table with the newspapers and jam where you left them. So early on, I fancied myself a journalist when I was just a student. And this poem is called The Journalism Student, 1968. And those of you who were young in 1968 and lived through those years and into the 70s in this country will remember the girl, the burning girl who ran through the photograph. The Journalism Student, 1968. We lived by column inches, hermetic deadlines, the pleasures of our names above the fold, hunched over stand-up tabletops, our fingers capped with cooling wax. We wielded dull X-Acto knives, pressed yards of adjective-free copy to the page with rubber rollers, conjured images in a closet in the basement, a red light to let secret lives float up, unharmed in dark. Our photographs, small flags in black and white. One afternoon, the Jurassic woolly scented teacher said to me, "You'll have a scholarship, the letters here." She waved it in the gluey air. That meant I'd go to college and whatever that would be. That day, I was a girl, a receiver, who would tell you now I've never understood enough, can only faintly see the sacred hearts of others and all that matters in this marbled, savage world. The ruined empires of the poor, a burning girl running through a photograph forever. The faces of men, of women, broken open by their wanting. On that lonesome afternoon, I turned back to our tables, our last brave words finally staked to paper, our pages off to press, an unread letter on my desk. Like other parts of the world, we have fires here now in the summer. And most of the fires aren't right near us, but the smoke comes in here from California, sometimes from Montana, it blows this way, from Canada, from British Columbia, and from the former Soviet Union. Fire in the North Country. Every living thing speaks of fire. Even the fog smolders with ashes. The sun, blood lit, the sky crackles with it. Now I see why I worshiped you, who lived without pity or regret. You smoldered rust red in July. I was small, held together by nothing. I worshiped you like an answer, you who took and bestowed like an addict. I was nothing, barely held together. My charms, smoke, and afflictions. An addict, my mouth filled with thirst. If you were a woman, I'd admire you. If you were a horse, I'd ride. Oh, arsonist, flamethrower, burning down the scalded air. See that we were children, wanting only to be fed the way a forest feeds on fire. As it is, I fear you, though I keep you near like a fever. I'll read you a couple poems in which my mother makes an appearance. Gary Lilly and I read recently together in Port Townsend, and we both ended up reading without consulting with each other. We both read poems in which our mothers appear. Gary Lilly is another Lost Horse poet, and he's here with us this evening. Avatar. Last night, drifting through sleep's shrouded coast, I returned to my own first days, the wonder that washed over me, my arrival from the cloistered heat, wet, unknown, headlong into the world, the startling gulp of air, and how my mother dressed me in a cotton gown, swaddled me in flannel, a nameless one, bound, unfledged, and brought me home, and in the slow undertow of her chaptered sleep, carried me from room to room, pastel light of snow in every glass, ice disquieting the hours, and laid me down, ran her small, thick country hands the quick interval of me, hands grown used to parting dark from dark, to wash and powder me the way I went with her alone at night when I would cry, to rock and suck and fall into the careless beauty of that once given sleep. Fathomless, those standstill hours when I was just a little one, the cooing vowels that tied us fast to what words later could not say, while I grew fat on milk, her world-round breasts, her arms a second womb, my aviator, my avatar. She ferried me through whispered air, and how she settled on a name, Ruth, companion of the wanderers, the sorrowing, and fixed me to the earth, those long winter nights of my becoming. My first garden. My mother was dying, and I made a garden outside my door. Only her dying and a garden. My mother was dying, and I put seeds in the ground to save myself. By August, I had salvia, sage, tender verbena, tall purple flowers. Bouquet in hand, I walked behind, not near medicine enough, but I took it. And this poem is called What Is to Be Done? The question I still ask myself, what can we do? What can I do? What can I do? What is to be done? And it's remembrance for my friend S. Reddick. I'll answer your question now, the one you asked that evening we sat in your room, the hot plate you never used, not even for coffee, windows filmed with the voices of dust that reach us years later. The river was weeds, the sentinel towers of the canneries and sawmills that crowded its banks, the graveyard hours you stood on the peach line, the corrugated light, women and men in white aprons roaming through warehouses, trailing the sun. None of us knew the way out of suffering. Who could escape the torrent of heat that surged over our bodies and our houses like a dream? Our lovers' kids slept open-mouthed on damp sheets while we wrote in small notebooks, discovering the ruins of sky, the moment of falling, always in us. The world was on fire, each of us on fire. Empires trolled over the earth, their monstrous wheels. We argued power, revolution, melodic rebellion. Bewailed the girls we'd loved without claim, the ones who left town in bad-mannered cars. Our own country becoming Rome in the beautiful, devouring flare of youth once given. The mind returns to its sorrows by habit, like a waitress counting out pennies at the end of her shift. There it builds its glorious city of losses. Old friend, moonlight climbs over the hills tonight while I write you this letter. The fires will keep burning. I see that now. And how the small gestures of thought, how immense the silence between words. We recited Whitman and Ginsberg while our clothes tumbled in a laundromat dryer. I remember the consoling ring of our coins as they dropped in the slots, the music, the real blessing of that. Soon enough, our lives would show us how all is torn away, dying moment to moment to become something else, leaving only heat and the windburnt leaves. Thank you so much for listening and for this reading. It's wonderful to be with people from all over the world listening to poetry.
Kathryn, exquisite, exquisite reading from your new collection, Seed Wheel. Oh, there's so many things I could actually say, but just briefly, you brought me back to January of 1991,
Hmm.
when I had the opportunity to be in the apartment that Akhmatova
Yeah,
and
right.
Svetlana
Right.
were in, where they memorized their poems
Mhm.
and burned them.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh. I will also say there's nothing like hearing how you put an adjective to a noun. I was noting it, all the adjectives, like they are just, I just hope people re-listen to this and listen to how Kathryn uses her adjectives in just really, truly exquisite ways. They're very surprising. And I was just noting that all throughout the reading. I was just completely
Mm.
taken. Thank you so very much.
Mm.
I don't usually talk about craft, but I was like, I have to talk about the adjectives.
I disobeyed my journalism teacher. I used
I'm
adjectives.
very glad you did, because I learned a lot about adjectives today among those just beautiful poems. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Well, my friends, we are moving along, and now we get to return to hearing poems. Just I know that I've heard some of them before now from a previous reading. Wonderful poems in Ukrainian with the two translators of Nakalka Lysnewycz's book from the Lost Horse Press Contemporary Ukrainian Poetry Series, Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow. I'm going to introduce the two translators that we have with us today, co-translators, and let them talk with you a little more about the poet that they've worked with so carefully and intimately to bring you these poems. Well, again, welcome back to both Ali Kinsella and Dzvinia Orlowsky. And Ali Kinsella is, as I mentioned, the co-translator here of Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow. It was a book that was written over the last 4 decades. I'll talk a little bit more with you about her work. Ali has published work including essays, poetry, monographs, and has won the 2019 Kovalev Fund Prize for her translation of Taras Prokasko's Anna's Other Days. Ali holds an MA in Slavic Studies from Columbia University, where she focused on Eastern European history and literature, and wrote a thesis on the intersection of feminism and nationalism in small states. Ali is a former Peace Corps volunteer and lived in both Western and Central Ukraine for nearly 5 years, and is joining us today from Chicago, where she lovingly says she also sometimes works as a baker.
Hello, thank you.
Very accomplished. Dzvinia Orlowsky is the co-translator of Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow. Dzvinia is a Pushcart Prize poet, translator, and many of you, of course, in addition to knowing her poetry, also know her as the founding editor of 4-Way Books. Incredible titles from an absolutely necessary press here in the States. She is the author of 6 poetry collections published by Carnegie Mellon University Press, including her most recent Bad Harvest, which was named a 2019 Massachusetts Book Awards must read in poetry. Her inaugural collection, A Handful of Bees, was published and reprinted as part of Carnegie Mellon University Press's Classic Contemporary series. She's a contributing poetry editor to the Solstice Literary Magazine and founder of Night Riffs, a Solstice magazine reading and music series. And she teaches poetry and creative writing at Providence College and is a writer in residence at the Solstice Low Residency MFA in creative writing. Thank you both for joining us to share the work of obviously a poet that has spoken carefully and deeply to the both of you. So excited to get to hear the poetry. And Natalka, again, with you.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Sandy, and thank you once again for hosting us and the rest of the Lost Horse family. It's exciting to be part of such a large reading, even if I am by myself in my dining room. Natalka Bilocerkiewicz, for those of you who don't know her, is a poet who sort of emerged on the scene right before the Soviet Union collapsed. There's a picture of her. Thank you, Christine. And so she's a member of what is called the 80ers generation, which refers mostly to when they became popular. And as a member of that generation, she was really speaking to a lot of the feelings and challenges of the post-independence period in Ukraine. And she has continued to speak somewhat politically, not always, often lyrically since then, but she really made a name for herself at that time. I would say if anyone was following Ukrainian poetry in English translation 20 years ago, you probably would have heard of her, but not much has been translated since. And so Dzvinia and I wanted to take the opportunity with Lost Horse Press's series, the Contemporary Ukrainian Poetry series, to sort of fill in this gap that we thought was missing in her body of work. Dzvinia, would you like to say anything?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Sandy, for the introduction, and Lost Horse Press family, Christine, and all the other readers. It's just so honored to be here and be celebrating this book, and to have had the opportunity to work with Ali for over a year and a half. I will say that Natalka was introduced to me earlier, about maybe 20 or even more years ago, through Ed Hogan and Zephyr Press. And I had translated a number of her poems and fallen in love with them. And, scattered poems for festivals here and there. And then we sort of fell out of touch for a long, long period of time. So it was such a joyful moment for me when Ali contacted me and introduced herself and said, hey, would you be interested in translating the poems? And a resounding yes. I love her poetry because of the stark lyricism, the heavy imagery in a lot of it, and there's just so many different ways to interpret her work. And I'm just absolutely thrilled to see this large body of work put together. thanks to Christina and Grace and Lost Stars Press.
And with that, we'll start. Dzvinia and I are excited that we have our own poem, Knife, to read for you today. Depends on where you are, I guess. And I will be reading in Ukrainian, and she will read in English. Ніж. Ніж, щоб накроїти хліб. Ніж, майструвати сопілку. Ніж, щоб добити яхня вовком скалічене. Так гола, суха і пісна піниться раптом поверхня потом очищених риб в ющі Господнього дня. Знак милосердя і сліз. Без благодатнього знаку не доторкайся. Це ніж, музика, що убива. Це вже не просто слова, це та поезія без слів, де трава омива лезо небес.
Knife. A knife to slice bread. A knife to carve a whistle. A knife to finish killing the lamb wounded by the wolf. So naked, dry, and lean, the clean surface of fish foams with sweat and Sabbath day broth, a sign of mercy and tears. Don't touch it without a blessing. This knife, this music that kills. These aren't just words. They're poetry without words. Where grass washes, heaven's blade.
Зміряно. Міст. Повітря непорушне і гаряче, як моє тіло, вигнуте, як міст над річкою. Таке мовчання, наче п'ють солов'ї свій чорний алкоголь. Немає звуків, лише кольори, відтінки розстелили над водою. Обличчям вгору, так було зо мною. Такий же, як спирт, великі вечори. Є катастрофи пам'яті. Вона руйнується на знаки, на півтони, деталі брил, конструкції перил, перепливи крові, формули любові. Не пам'ятаю кольору очей, але їх вираз, він усе ще тут, коли згори униз на міст лягає фатальний ритм важких температур.
Bridge. The air is as still and hot as my body, arched like a bridge over a river. It's so quiet. The nightingales must be drinking their own black alcohol. No sounds, only color and shade spread out across the water. Face up, that's how it was with me, evenings as glorious as spirits. There, memory catastrophes. They collapse into signs, halftones, details of blocks, construction of rail, inflows of blood, formulas for love. I don't remember the color of eyes, just their expressions still here. When a devastating pulse of extreme temperature drops from above onto the bridge.
Серпнева ніч у місті задушлива. На Київ пливе густий потік розпеченої крони, каштанів, лип, тополь. О бідні дерева, о стебля хриляві, щоб оббили балкони. Оголені тіла на плесі простирад. Невже це ми, як лілії духовні? Шкірні покрови встелені греховно піском із пляжів смрадного Дніпра. Подай мені ту склянку, де вода із крана має сірий присмак хлору і туги, невідомої з таблиць хімічних елементів. Осіда поволі спека, і луна з надвору ранковий щебеть молодих жар птиць.
August city night. Stifles, thick stream of scorched chestnuts, lindens, poplars float toward cave. Poor trees with stunted trunks wrap themselves around balconies. Naked bodies on beds of blankets. Are we pure as lilies, our skin sinfully covered with sand from Val de Dnipro beaches? Give me that glass of tap water, its gray aftertaste of chlorine, and a longing not known on the periodic table of elements. The heat slowly settles. Outside, an echo, morning, twitter of young firebirds.
This next poem requires its own introduction. It is untitled in Ukrainian, but it has become known as Will Not Die in Paris. And it is undoubtedly Natalka's most famous poem. I had no hand in the translation. It was all Dzvinia. It was set to music by an early Ukrainian rock group, Mrtvy Kivin, which means dead rooster. And it's just incredibly famous. Everyone in Ukraine can sing it. But it was also instrumental in sort of, it's also often known as an anthem of the 80s or the 90s, and it sort of galvanized people's emotions. And I will read it in Ukrainian, and I think Dzvinia might have something that she wants to say about it herself, but I'll let you listen to it in Ukrainian. It starts with an epigraph from Cesar Vallejo. Я помру в Парижі в четвер увечері. Цезар Вальєго. Забуваються лінії, запахи, барви і звуки. Слабне зір, гасне слух, і міняється радість проста. За своєю душею простягнеш обличчя і руки, але високо і недосяжно вона проліта. Залишається тільки вокзаль на останнім пероні. Сіра піна розлуки клубочиться кухня і от. Вже вона розмиває мої беззахисні долоні, і огидним солодким теплом наповзає народ. Залишилася любов, але краще б її не було. В провінційній постелі я плакала, доки стомилась, і бредливо рум'яний бузок заглядав до вікна. Поїзд рівно йшов, і закохані мляво дивились, як під тілем твоїм задихала полиця брудна. Затихала, стихала банально вокзальна весна. Ми помрем не в Парижі, тепер я напевно це знаю. В провінційній постелі, що потом кищить і слизьми. І твого коньяку не подасть тобі жоден, я знаю. Нічиїм поцілунком не будемо втішені ми. Під мостом Мірабону не розійдуться кола пітьми. Надто гірко ми плакали, ображали природу. Надто сильно любили коханці, соромлячи тим. Надто вірші писали поети, зневаживши зроду. Нам вони не дозволять померти в Парижі. І воду під мостом Мірабо окільцюють конвоєм пустим.
Thank you. I love this poem, and I was very grateful again to have been invited by Ed Hogan many, many years ago for Press to translate it. This poem has so many meanings, literary, cultural, personal, and Natalka has also said the same. The literary references are there with Vallejo and also with Apollinaire's Le Poème Mirabeau that addresses passing time and unhappy, fleeting love. So for Natalka, this poem did have that kind of personal meaning that everybody during Brezhnev's time thought, oh, the romance, Paris was like a Mecca, literary Mecca, and we'll never get there. And so there was this stagnation. There was no movement. You couldn't leave to go to Paris. So Ali and I thought it was really interesting because we were working on this collection during quarantine. So we started thinking about the ability to go anywhere, movement, whether it was literal or symbolic. So this poem also has symbolic movement. It has kind of the Freudian train symbol for death, that if you ventured outside of your limited borders, you would not make it back alive. But also, We Will Not Die in Paris is also a statement of poetry is written in the provinces, but yet people go to die in cities. So it's much more romanticized, whatever, but it was kind of a reclaiming and saying, no, the talent, the genius is here. So we are not going to go elsewhere to die. This is where the poetry stays. So there's just so many meanings to the poem. I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. So, and thank you, Ali, for reading it in Ukrainian, and I'll read it in English. Will not die in Paris. I will die in Paris on Thursday evening, César Vallejo. You forget the lines, smells, colors, and sounds. Sight weakens, hearing fades, simple pleasures pass. You lift your face and hands towards your soul, but to high and unreachable summits it soars. What remains is only the depot, the last stop, the gray foam of goodbyes, lathers, and swells. Already it washes over my naked palms. Its awful sweet warmth seeps into my mouth. Love alone remains, though better off gone. In a provincial bed, I cried till exhausted. Through the window, a scraggly rose-colored lilac spied. The train moved, unspent lovers stared at the dirty shelf heaving beneath your flesh. Outside a depot, spring passed, grew quiet. Will not die in Paris, I know now for sure, but in a sweat and tear-stained provincial bed. No one will serve us our cognac, I know, and we won't be saved by kisses under the Pont Mirabeau. Murky circles won't fade. Too bitter we cried, abused nature. We loved too fiercely, our lovers shamed. Too many poems we wrote, disregarding poets. They'll not let us die in Paris, and the alluring water under the Pont Mirabeau will be encircled with barricades. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep muting and unmuting and then I'm forgetting. This next poem, it's a portion of a cycle called Allergy. And I would like to read a couple notes just so you have more context for these poems. Will We Get to Washington, which you'll hear, is a reference to a poem by Taras Shevchenko. And Taras Shevchenko is Ukraine's most famous son. He was the first one to really write in Ukrainian as a language. It's not the first thing written in Ukrainian, but we can consider it the first big one. He's a romantic poet, if I'm not mistaken. Dzvinia could correct me on that. But he has the line, "When will we get to Washington with the new and just law? We'll indeed get there someday." And that was written in 1897. The other note is the line, "Unharness your horses, lads," taken from a Ukrainian folk song about two young lovers in the garden, as most Ukrainian folk songs are. And in this case, the Rostov sadist is Andriy Chikatilo, also known as Andrei Chikatilo. He was Ukrainian, but he was tried in the Rostov Oblast of the Russian Republic in 1992 for the sexual assault and murder of over 50 young women and children, and he sang this song at his trial. Алергія. Ці дні, прожиті нами, відійшли до інших днів, прожитих нами. Ляглі на брук масні криваві плями, дощі їх змили. Майво прапорів більш не рождає втіхи, ні надії. І тільки танки страху на Майдані такого ж понеділкового дня. Дні пережиті нами, як трава у нашому саду, руда і жовтява. Наш бідний сад, мов очманілий пава, летить нікуди з криком ні про що. Криклива осінь, мов на дзвін соборний, зійшлися юрбі ідіотів, чорних, червоних, синіх, і летять згори листівки про нові умови гри.
Allergy. These days we lived disappeared into other days we also lived. Greasy, bloody stains on a gravel path, Rain washed them away. A rustling of flags no longer brings delight or hope, only terrifying tanks on the Maidan on a Monday afternoon. Days we've survived like grass in our garden, ruddy yellow, brown. Poor garden, a mad peahen flying nowhere, squawking about nothing. Autumn clangs as loudly as church bells, calling crowds of fools to flock in black, red, blue. Flyers drift from above, proclaiming new rules of the game.
Починається знов алергія. Мабуть, до опалого листя, до сухого пілку хризантем та останніх жоржин, доконаючи від бур'яну. Або, може, до того неспокійного виразу плавнів та голих лухів, тоскно, глухо в селі. Втім, і в місті гнітять жебарки, переходять з пропитими пиками нежить. Потім ще ця кусюча дрібна мурашва, що заноситься разом з піском на взутті до помешкань. Одна тільки втіха – жити їй лиш до першого снігу. Розмови, черги, інфлюенса, постійна хатна метушня, цибулі смаженої запах і комунального прання. Дитина ниє, телевізор співає про волю осяку, і президент летить до Менська в жовто-блакитному літаку. І демагоги, і демократи однак ледачі і тупі, і часом хочеться блювати на шаровари золоті, на підмальовані закони, злиденні крам, продажний блиск. Чи діждемося Вашингтона? А, діждемося таки колись.
Again, my allergy begins, maybe to burning leaves, to the dry pollen of chrysanthemums and last dahlias, to the dying bunches of weeds. Or maybe it's to that ill-at-ease look of reed beds and bare meadows, wistful, overgrown in the village. Yet in the city, beggars hound the passageways with drunk faces and runny noses. And then there's that tiny biting ant borne on shoes along the dirt to apartments. There's one consolation. It'll live only until the first snow. Conversations, cues, influenza, the constant commotion at home, the smell of fried onions and shared laundry, a child whines, the TV sings about our freedom, and the president flies to Minsk in a yellow-blue plane. The demagogues and the Democrats are all lazy and dumb, and sometimes you want to puke on their gold trousers, on the gussied up laws, pathetic wares, glitter for sale. Will we get to Washington? Yes, we'll get there someday.
Боюся тих, що вийдуть із печер на поклик м'яса і видовищ. Знаю, і там є кров. Якщо розбить комп'ютери або бібліотеку спалити, а ще краще ноти, скрипки, рояли. Ой, який оркестр заграє, і на вишкірені зуби легенький усміх опаде. Боюся тих, що вийдуть із печер. Їм нічого втрачати, крім кайданів умовностей. Будь ласка, дуже прошу, добрий день, пане, на добраніч, пані, проходьте, дякую. Уже шкварчить вогонь, танцюють тіні, і садист Ростовський співає. Розпрягайте, хлопці, коней.
I fear those who will come out of the caves at the call of meat and circuses. I know there's blood there. If you must, smash the computers or burn the library, better yet, all sheet music, violins, the pianos. Oh, what an orchestra will play, and a light smile will fall upon the bare teeth. I fear those who will come out of caves. They have nothing to lose but their chains of convention. Please and thank you. Good morning, sir. Good evening, ma'am. After you, my pleasure. The fire's already crackling. The shadows dance and the Rostov Seda sings. Unharness your horses, lads.
This next poem is called February, and it has two references. There's an epigraph by Ukrainian poet Lena Kostenko, And she was famous. She's about a generation before Natalka. She was very famous in the 60s, and she signed an open letter that was protesting state repressions of Ukrainian intellectuals and was blacklisted for nearly a decade. The other important note is that in late 2000, journalist Georgi Gongadze, who had founded an independent online newspaper, disappeared, and a body was found decapitated and burned in the woods not too far from Kyiv. And in February of the next year, people took to the streets. It was determined that it was in fact his body, and people took to the streets in February. Лютий. Останній місяць довгої зими переживемо. Все-таки і ми у чомусь звинили. Із пітьми виходить ніж, як місяць. І гітара вибранькує про трупи і лисі, і на касетах наші голоси. Хто винен менше, більше, навпаки, хто винен більше, менше. І з роки повзуть роки, неначе черв'яки, і все-таки за все надходить кара. Нещасна земля підневільних снів, мерзених слів, одрубаних голів, обпаленої кислотою шкіри, твій солов'їний вирвано язик, і тільки мат, і свіст, і п'яний крик доноситься з-під княжої порифи. Моє княгині, жоно риб і жаб, твій кожен син, негідник або раб. Кому віддатись і кого любити над берегами вічної ріки? Бухгалтери, майори їхні жінки, і в закордонних школах їхні діти. Що виросте з розкиданих колось? Нам голе поле бачить привелось, але жнива таки побачить хтось, і пройде серп ходою супостата, і замолотять ципом на току, і хліб на вишиванім рушнику лежатиме, як голова котята.
February. It's the last month of a long winter we'll survive. After all, we were at fault for something. From the darkness, a knife emerges like the moon. A guitar strums about corpses and forests while our voices endure on cassettes. Some owe less, others more. Some more, others less. Out of our hands, years crawl like worms. Yet there's punishment for everything. Unfortunate earth of enslaved dreams, of nasty words, decapitations of skin burned with acid, your nightingale tongue ripped out, and only Russian curses, a whistle, a drunken cry heard from under imperial robes. My princess, wife of fish and frogs, your every son a scoundrel or a slave. Whom to give oneself to and whom to love. On the banks of the eternal river, accountants, majors, their wives, their children sent off to foreign schools. What will grow from the scattered grain? We had to see the naked field. Though some will get to see the harvest, the sickle will go the way of the foe. They'll beat with flails on the threshing floor. On an embroidered cloth, our bread will lie like a severed head.
Вінарня вовк. 2 роки тому, навіть 2,5, жити іще не здавалося так безнадійно. Не захлиналися ржавою кров'ю каштани, повені не підступали до вікон будинків, там, де вінарня вовк і кав'ярня голуб, і маленький театр під великими ліхтарами. 2 роки тому, навіть 2,5, ще не було таких лютих снігів і морозів, не замерзала вода у котлах і рурах, не примерзали флейти до уст і пальців, сніг не обліплював ноги в тонких панчохах, паморозь не лягала на килими в готелях. І лісові пожежі, цунамі з жіночими іменами, кров і вино на мертвих ногах у тонких панчохах і килими, засипані уламками літаків. Хай, ще лишається час для останнього знаку, час, коли бігтимуть вовки, летітимуть голубі, і, полишивши фундаменти, витягнувши коріння, зникнуть винарня Вовк і кав'ярня Голуб, ліхтарі, каштани, готель, театр.
Wolf Wine Bar. 2 years ago, maybe even 2.5, life hadn't yet seemed so hopeless. Chestnuts didn't choke on rusty blood. Floods didn't reach the windows of the buildings with the Wolf Wine Bar and Dove Coffee Shop and the small theater under their large lanterns. 2 years ago, maybe even 2.5, we didn't have such severe snows and frosts. Water didn't freeze in the boilers and pumps in the pipes. Flutes never froze to lips or fingers. The snow didn't stick to legs in thin stockings, and ice didn't appear on carpets in hotels. And the forest fires, tsunamis with women's names, blood and wine on dead legs in thin stockings, carpets covered with the wreckage of aircraft. So be it. There's still time for the final sign, a time when wolves run, doves fly, and having left behind their foundations, pulling out their roots, the Wolf Wine Bar and Dove Coffee Shop will disappear. The lanterns, chestnuts, hotel, and theater.
And this is our last poem. Ластівки. Остання спроба вилетіти десь із цього курника, з цієї стайні, цієї спальні, де висять нагальні, кохані запахи тваринного гнізда. Туди, туди, до пещених небес, де мов підніжжя дроти електричні, і де веселки змахи феєричні, спастичні втіхи бідного життя. Як рукавички чорні з наших перст, мов чорні з білим клавіші рояльні, як фейерверки вночі фестивальні, вони летять із рідного гнізда. Вони вже там, невидимий, як безкінечний звук кінечної безодні, такі відважні і такі холодні, самотні злети нашого життя.
Swallows. A last attempt to fly off somewhere, from this coop, from this stable, from this bedroom where the urgent sweet smells of an animal's nest hang there to there. To caress heavens touched where electrical wires are like a pedestal and the fiery strokes of a rainbow, the unsettled comforts of a poor life, like black mittens from our fingers, like the black and white keys of a piano, like festival fireworks at night. They fly from their native nest. They're already there, invisible, like the endless sound of the final abyss, so fearless and so cold, the solitary flights of our lives. Thank you. Yikes.
That is just such extraordinary work. I'm mesmerized, I'm moved, I honestly can barely speak from hearing it today. Ali and Dzvinia, like what I wanted to say is that these poems to me from Natalka take longing and repression and just stitch their lines just so incredibly. And the gratitude that myself and those of us listening today, I know, feel, because if not for the two of you, we would not have the door or the window opened just ever so slightly more to learn of the poets and the poetry from another part of not only the world, but of conscience and consciousness. So thank you immensely. The book, my friends, is make sure you have it. The book is Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow. Thank you again, Ali, Dzvinia. Well, to our finale of today, amazing to continue to be able to hear the poetry. I can't wait for you to see the cover of Carolyn Wright's latest book, Masquerade. Take a look, my friends. This cover alludes to the absolutely extraordinary vision of what's inside the book. We got a little taste last week, and we're fortunate again to have Carolyn join the family of Lost Horse Press today to share some more poems from her latest book, Masquerade. Lost Horse Press also published This Dream the World New and Selected Poems in 2017. And the title poem won a Pushcart Prize and also appeared in the Best American Poetry 2009. You're also familiar, of course, with Carolyn from her groundbreaking anthology that she co-edited, Raising Lily Ledbetter, Women Poets Occupy the Workspace, which came out from Lost Horse Press, of course, in 2019. And we've had the pleasure to host 2 readings from that. Carolyn has received 10 Pushcart Prize nominations and has 5 earlier books of poetry, a volume of essay, and 5 award-winning volumes in translation from the Spanish and Bengali. She's a contributing editor for the Pushcart Prizes, and she teaches for Seattle's Richard Hugo House, as well as at literary conferences and festivals across the United States and elsewhere. She's also received a National Endowment for the Arts and 4 culture grants, and is a 2020-2021 Fulbright Scholar Award recipient, which is going to allow her to take her back to Bahia after the pandemic subsides in Brazil. Welcome back, of course, and close us out for this extraordinary afternoon of poetry, evening, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you everybody who's attended. Thank you for all the wonderful poetry in Ukrainian and English. Thank you. I won't thank everybody by name right now because I know people are, some of you, it's way past your bedtime. So I'm just going to jump right in, and I'm so pleased that Gary is here. Gary Lilly, also a member of the Lost Horse Stable. And Gary is right here. He's right here in the upper right-hand corner, which would be the northeast of the book cover, the back cover, or in Portuguese, you would say, o Nordeste, you know, which is my favorite part of Brazil. But we're not going to be in Brazil at this point. We're still going to be in Massachusetts, in that little seacoast village on the North Atlantic, because I'm going to start, I read all different poems, but because Gary's here and because he chose this poem as he was guest poetry editor for Raven Chronicles, when Raven Chronicles was still doing magazines, and he chose this poem for that issue. And it's called The Putting Off Dance. You know, it's like keep away. A quick introduction. This is an arts and writers colony residency program. And the 2 people in question occupy studios right next to each other. And there was a lot of jokes about putting stethoscopes against the wall and things like that. So you'll hear all of that here. The Putting Off Dance. Humming a blues riff from far inland, You lay the moon shells I give you on your table's little dune of letters that have piled up for days, unopened as the bodies of sand dollars. You are the man with whom I share a wall. All morning in adjacent studios, we move between kitchen and work table, each footstep tracking its next door shadow. November's 10-knot gale rattles the veranda, the sidelong windows empty of sky. In the diorama I imagine, this row of studios opens to its cutaway dilemmas. In jest, you press a stethoscope to my wall, X-ray vision switched on full, like figments of wishful thinking. Moon shells pile up, signs of the zodiac look both ways. Who says no is out of the question? As long as I type, your voice is the sea in my ear. When I pause, a chair scrapes on your side of the wallboards. You catwalk down the veranda to my door. It's too late to outwit the moment, to redouble my keystrokes in an arbitrary gabble, to reverse your steps, erase your profile through my Venetian blinds. Your honey and mulled wine win this round. Your tongue-tied plea, I never quite believe, but my alibis ride a tilting raft. You give me a turquoise amulet with broken clasp, its damage unexplained, as women who ring for you on the downstairs phone. I set an African violet on the sill, its petals meant to deflect you. Who leads? I ask the season's waltz card. Who follows? Our moves tell the future in mirrors. You stumble whenever the phone switches long distance partners. Your zodiac unknown, what sign would claim us from dreams shifting dune house? We go back to our desks as if to lovers. The phone downstairs ringing its two-tone note. Decide, decide. Voices fly out of the letter piles, clamoring for answers. My blood's divided longings. When bedroom lights go out in this coastal town, our footsteps echo across the floorboards. So much diverted sleep between us. Stalling for time, I name old lovers, those who quoted from the complete guide to rejection. Rain squalls off and on all evening like a difficult conversation. Doesn't night's unbroken sky arch like a serious question? Our ends and beginnings threaded on the same strand, each constellation lined up along its own ecliptic. I fear your universe with its own rules, traceries of North Atlantic sand between my quilted comforter and pillows. I scribble predictions in the dark while the town sleeps, inventing one last reason it wouldn't work. My body up against that wall, braced for giving in. Okay, so you may have noticed some of the, shall we say, old technology, you know, the payphone downstairs on the wall. Nobody has phones in their units, no cell phones. And the typewriter, the manual Olivetti typewriter, the only thing that kept typing when the power went out and everybody's electric typewriters just died. Anyway, so we're going to go on. We're going to move on now to the naked scene, right? I said in a comment earlier, I promised in the chat a bit of naked, right? So here it is. It's a little phrase at the beginning that this person used to say. Hello, world. We rise together naked and stand before the morning's half-drawn blinds. Oceanic light surrenders itself at our feet. Afternoons, we walk along the one street spining this narrow town, with paper sacks of scallops and okra, or packages to mail, our laundry things already married in the basket. Other days, we stroll salt crystal paths through pine shadow, the outer dunes beyond those boughs shifting like mid-ocean swells. We riff lines into gull-crazy air, calls and responses bearing their way forward. One rope looped to another, late sun in our eyes, a lingering brilliance. Brainstorms I scrawl onto old envelopes. Who can tell which lines are yours, which mine? As the tide's twilight fulcrum shifts, the full moon rises in perfect opposition to the sun. And syzygy is your word, love uncoupled from need. We believe in such pronouncements, walking home past the shrimp boat's silvered rigging. Evenings I chop peppers and leeks and you stir filet into the gumbo, calling me once by another lover's name. In my bliss of unlistening, it would take years to catch up to the heart's subtractive powers, forgiving both of us our losses. Okay, I think I will stay with the theme of food and cooking for a few minutes. This poem is kind of one of my favorites in the book. Has a lot of references to jazz and to food. I am not a good cook, but I enjoy eating and I enjoy imagery. It's called Gumbo Nights. And yeah, it's a cheerful moment, one of the bright moments. Move away from that table, you tease, as I help myself to a plateful of your Creole étouffée. You're gonna end up wide as you are tall. All those evenings you chuckle at your own jokes as the gumbo shimmers with scallops and okra, shallots and filet, while I stir batter for cornbread, splash a shotgun glass of burgundy into the squash chowder's slow ochre bubbles. Trouble's brewing, you smile, smoothing your hands over the bottle of budget Chardonnay as if it were a woman. Inside that thin woman, there's a fat woman fighting to get out. Out pops the cork with a satisfying thwack, to which I laugh my answer, popping my own cheek with a finger as you light the gallows jug candle with its fringed skirt of wax drippings, centerpiece of my thrift shop tablecloth. The kitchen walls lean in to listen, and I listen as Sarah Vaughan croons Lover Man on my small radio, almost a lullaby that winter when jazz is as new to me as Cape Cod's lilac dawns. Dawn is a voice still trembling in my throat, but Nina Simone's bent blue-violet notes soothe my body into believing in itself. Do I believe what you call the body's shy audacity as we sip from after dinner jelly glasses, last of the Chardonnay, smoky and pale, while you gaze at me, appraise me, and I gaze back, matching the gleam in my eye to yours? Your knock on my door on New Year's, weeks before, as I unpacked the gift-wrapped packets from a visit home. The same day, one of your old lovers headed home after a week-long rendezvous. Through my wall, 2 sets of footsteps hollow on floorboards of your studio, echo receding down the wood plank steps, thud falls on winter's frost-heavy path to the bus stop. Stop it, I almost told myself, but didn't, because Billie Holiday growled, "How could you?" to some double-dealing lover from her tiny big band stand inside my radio. The radio's lingering swing as I heard your footsteps retrace themselves, erase themselves from the walkway and wood plank steps, canceling out all short-term memories. "Forget that foolish week," you murmured, your face as I let you into my studio, haggard with bravado. Did we know the midnight hour had already tolled for us from the church steeple's pale melon clock face? "Let's face the music and dance," cried the music in my head, ahead of yours for a change. "A change gonna come, I know," cried Sam Cooke, "a change the woman whose fury sent him out beyond the sky never could have known." What did we know then as you stood up and came around my table to take me again as your lover? "Lover man, oh, where can you be?" sobbed the jazz women on the radio as the woman I was then gave in and let you come, although I was already moving away from the table. Let's see. I want to read. Let's go across the continent now. I'm not going to try to stay any longer there. I'm going to go to something that has become all too familiar in this part of the world here on the West Coast, and that is fire. There was a move across country to Southern California, to a part of the country called Temecula, which is up on a ridge in Southern California. Also a place where artists kind of convene. It's called Fire Season, and it mentions, actually, this turned out to be more premonitory than I knew. It mentions the town of Paradise, which, as you know, was absolutely practically destroyed by fire. One of the terrible fires recently, a few years ago. Fire Season, Temecula, California. The cats roll for hours in the dust. They stalk us, fur matted, eyes green with evasion. Your first letter to me arrives from Paradise, the home of an old lover. Sting of ash grit stronger than black sage off the desert. The Santa Ana winds driving us like reluctant fighters into each other's thoughts. Trust, you write, a double line under the word, as if you can scarcely believe it. Fire still in the air. Mid-afternoon, the first gray flakes through scrubbed junipers, phalanxes of flame in the ironwood. Not everything's resolved. I'm keeping my options open, fingers crossed. I'm tired of such confusion in my life, this running from myself and all that jive. Do I believe your letter? Where there's smoke, there's fire. My own thoughts tremble, flashes under the skin. The answer I never mail means to signify. We can't be surrogates for anyone. Not the old lover who gives you cash for the road, though the road out of Paradise leads to another woman, into Chaparral Hills, where I squat naked on flagstones by the cabin, touching myself as you did in that narrow bed all winter on the other coast. I'm tired of running, you murmur as you step through my door. Your hands under my dress are fearless as ever. Blue shadowed labyrinths of our desire turn once again in our favor. We make love, our bodies dream slow in the stunned air, the room deep as a cistern. Our tongues moving in each other's mouths, we go where words conceal themselves, coral adders curled in pine slash by the cabin door. Sulfur and potash homestead on our eyelids. We ignore the chopper blades, evacuation warnings. Outside, the winds rise, live oaks flail their arms like men trying to beat out the sun. Your hands draw their conclusions on my skin. Centripetal rings of fire close on the ridge beyond Far Spring. Rescue planes circle the wrong canyons. Our different bodies not quite giving ourselves away. Strange how the afternoon's dry ache makes good its claim, like deer that linger too long in the clearing. The loyalty I ask for slithers like flame through your practiced hands. You enter me, and I empty my thighs of wisdom. And I think I'll conclude there because it's 2:00 and some of us know where our cats are. Gary knows where his cat is, but I don't want to go on too long. So the next thrilling episode will be whenever the next reading is, and we'll move up the coast and across country again. And we'll finally get to New Orleans, where the masquerade will continue. So thank you so much, Sandy, Christine, Kathryn, Dzvinia, Lyuba, and Ali, and everybody, Natalka, whom we did not meet. And I'm just so pleased to hear all of you and see all of you here on this Zoom, in the Zoom room.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Again, the book is Masquerade, and of course, we will get to hear from it again in the future. I want to just encourage everyone now before we close out, and I hope you'll all appreciate that, you know, our reading went longer than they usually do today because we wanted to bring the multiplicity of language to you, and that necessitated the desire to extend the reading for the usual time that we have. So I want to thank everybody, if you'd love to unmute so we can thank Lyuba, Yakimchuk, Svetlana, Lavochkina, Kathryn Hunt, Ali Kinsella, Dzvinia, Orlowsky, and Carolyn Wright once again for just a most, I don't really have words for it today. They provided the amazing work and words. And of course to Christine Holbert from Lysnewycz Press for bringing them together.
Bravissimo!
Thank you.
Fabulous.
you.
Fantastic.
And I just want to say hello to my partner in this Ukrainian series, Grace Mahoney. I see that she's here today too. Thank you, Gracie. And also I had a comment. We just heard from Ilya Kaminsky, the winner of the Idaho Prize for Poetry. And it's a book called STEM, or a manuscript called STEM. It will be a book soon by Lisa Ortiz, and she came to the reading too. I sent her
Okay.
last minute. Congratulations, Lisa. Thanks, Sandy.
Great news to share. You heard it first here on Cultivating. Everyone, if you have any upcoming readings or announcements, this is a good time to put them in the chat. And I want to encourage you all to join us back here next Sunday, where we are going to feature some poets from over in Ireland. And the UK. We'll have Jessamine O'Connor, Hugh McMillan, Neil Young, and Ethna Hand will be joining us. And get your poems out and ready for October 17th, when we will have our Poets Focus live open mic. You all are the features on the theme of wings. Anything having to do with wings, any kind of wings. You get to interpret the theme, bring your poems, and the first 12 of you will be our features, 6 minutes each on the 17th. Also give you a little bit of a preview to October 24th's new book showcase. You know, I booked these months and months in advance. And it turns out that one of our readers, Ashley M. Jones, has just been named the new poet laureate of Alabama just a couple weeks ago. Ashley will be joining us with Elizabeth Levinson, Karen Poppy, and Judith Kerman with their new books. And of course, come back on Halloween, where we're going to have the open mic for your tricks and treats. You can register for all of our Cultivating Voices live poetry readings, as you know, because you're here on the event pages, or watch us live on Zoom. And again, thank you everybody for being here today. So grateful to be able to just share this reading with you, and to be able to bring the diversity of things that we're able to bring because of the connection of the poets that we have as our membership here at Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Thanks to Don Krieger, of course, for being our production wizard, and to Kim Parsons for being our graphic guru. Everybody,
Ready for the tech Mondays.
indeed, indeed. You know, our humanity depends ever more and always for our deep listening of one another. Today, we were able to really practice that listening in multiple languages. And it was fantastic to have folks join us from Ukraine, Germany, the US, to share that poetry. Everybody, please take good care of yourselves this week. Take care of your beloveds. And of course, keep writing your extraordinary poems. We'll see you next week, and see you on Facebook. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank
Sandy.
you so much,
Fantastic.
everybody. Thank you.
Great.
We'll all be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Be well.
Yes.